Looks to be this is running. So if anyone's waiting and hung around, I appreciate your hanging in. As you know, is a tradition to have delays and technical difficulties. One I intend to break, but that's just where it is right now. What to talk about? There's a lot to talk about. I mean, rest in peace to Charlie Kirk. I would have probably said that from a cultural, creative standpoint, probably this organization. This is just going to be an informal chat. I mean, but I'd say this organization probably would be probably take a little bit of a different approach than he would, as far as our goal is entertainment. That's imperative. And I think that Charlie had some pretty serious minded takes on things. Okay, that's not to say that like every take was golden or whatever. It just doesn't really matter. What matters is an important public figure and someone that shouldn't have met and end the way he did has, and that's deplorable, and that is worth recognizing. That shouldn't happen in this country. I know it's maybe a little bit of a political note, but it really is. It's a human note. Absolutely should not have happened. Whatever disagreements people have, and differences in worldview, that what happened should not have happened. That's not the way to go about. It's just completely awful and unacceptable. It almost goes without saying, but it has to be said. I think actually there's a lot of stuff there's too much going on. There's too much going on. Okay, right now, I had some vision in mind for this organization. Some goals have been moved towards. Definitely good stuff. There's been good stuff that's happened. But we're looking at a really hard time. The gaming markets are in turmoil. And by markets, I mean to say like the product markets, the shops. Didn't need to be that way. Wasn't really that way up until recently. Well, I mean, there's been issues, right? There's no perfect market. Okay. Some of which we've highlighted, some of which one of our contemporary partner orgs, Steam Sentinels, shout out Steam Sentinels, still is monitoring, particularly on Steam. But it's all over. It's all over. That we've been going back and tracking the issues with bad promotional practices and all that for games going back over a decade, right? Not all of this is published for our part, but there's this is something that's under active research, and there's already been a lot of scholarship dedicated to. But that's not the issue. That's not really the issue here. The internet, and this, I did a whole stream on this. The internet as we know it is kind of coming to an end. So there's some prominent losses of cultural heritage, technical continuity, things on the horizon that are also in the background. And I have an IT background, technical background. Um, my focus on gaming is because, as far as I'm concerned, um, technology is there to, I mean, A, it's there to serve the user. What else? Okay. If that's not happening, why are we technologying? That's fundamental. Um, but after you answer that question, if you answered affirmatively that technology is demonstrably helping serving the user, um, I mean, you want to play a game, right? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there's productivity, right? That's productivity is the reason people buy computers or have bought computers or will, and a lot of reason the institutions, businesses, um, it all has it has there's always a productivity purpose. Even of course in gaming on the development side, right? Um, if you're farming in game, there's a degree of that too. But I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the highest use of technology is actually to provide gaming. Truth be told, um, the all of the great industrial revolution and all that. If you want to encapsulate like the the penultimate use of technology, it's to play computer games. That's my viewpoint. Um, I mean, yeah, Hadron Collider, okay, great. Hubble was amazing. I think would have James Webb. James Webb is super duper amazing. Um, but I mean, Chandra, right? That Chandra Levy thing. That's amazing. Um, and in a lot of other fields, not just physics and astronomy, but um, from a practical standpoint, from a personal point of view, like directly for most average people, it's computer games. It's computer games or it's console games or whatever. It's like that. Literally, that is the zenith personal application of technology. Um, some might view that to be a bit of a luxuriant perspective, right? But I think it's a super perspective, right? I mean, as I understand it, astronomy deals with time spans that are really really long, right? And as these machines scan the sky and stuff, if I had to guess, this is just a guess here. At some point, if they weren't doing other homework, someone is probably playing computer games while they're waiting for the data to come in from the observatories. That's I'm just saying, not stepping on anybody's grant activity here, but I'll bet you that happens, and um, that's pretty cool. That's actually like that's what most apart from like educational and utility use, right? Because I mean that's it underpins it. But the greatest incentive, right? Reliable incentive. Why do I want to build a computer? That's going to be to play games. That's it. I mean, there's lots of other applications, but that's the top one. I'm definitely not alone in that. But I view it in very specifically those terms. Now I don't necessarily go through that each time I'm setting up a computer, but it's there in the back of my mind. It's a foregone conclusion. I've already gone through that. That decision is made. Um, there is more to that. I could expound upon that in the form of something approaching a thesis. Um, I'm not going to do that in this live stream, but that will be done. That will be done. The the serious jeopardization of the gaming platform marketplaces. I mean, we're talking about it's based on for anyone who doesn't know, it's basically age gating as a kind of a standard, right? They're saying no kids in whatever, depending on the appropriateness of the content. But long story short, the implementation is everybody gets carded, everybody goes through an ID process, and it's not something that's been rigorously tested or planned. So that's not good from a technical standpoint, point blank. And it's faulty. Without going into specific examples, these systems are failing. They've been observed to fail, and systems will fail, but um, it's sloppy. It's a sloppy political side implementation that's not good, not good technical work. Okay, that's that. And as far as the outcome, well, kind of a mixed bag, right? It's very new, very new. This is kind of being imposed on gaming marketplaces, in the name of safety and public protection, protect the children. Okay, but as it turns out, it's having not good effect, right? So being ineffective and in some cases actually sending users elsewhere where there isn't a restriction. So that deserves to be studied more. And maybe we shouldn't dive headlong into these sorts of things. But that's one major problem right now. That's a market problem. We didn't have that a few months ago. Before the so-called collective shout group, before before they rose to prominence again significantly, before Visa, MasterCard, PayPal made significant policy changes, recent, relatively abrupt. We didn't have that. All right, we had a relatively stable, healthy, and a still large. It's a still large gaming market. Um, what we're seeing is consolidation and restriction in terms of small studios. Publishers are having trouble getting their stuff out increasingly, um, and that's also been true separately for some things to do with art and comics, graphic novels from Japan and other places. That's kind of a side issue, but these things affect art per se. It's across the board. Visa and Mastercard have made restrictions recently in the name of what they view to be kind of a moral judgment. They say it's for reputational protection, right? They don't want to suffer the issues of selling something that looks like a nudie mag. Okay, but long story short, the things that they're restricting are their cartoons. Their cartoons, and very, I think, tellingly, these same processors are still engaged in actual live, in patronizing live R-rated, X-rated performances, like services like the only friends, that website or whatever. So it looks really inconsistent. It's a bad look and it's a bad practice. So that's a huge concern. We didn't have that. We didn't have that maybe 3 months back. I'm gonna say it's within the quarter. Okay, we have this in the same quarter. A huge amount, and this is going back. It's a little bit rambly here, but I'm just going to line it up as best I can. I don't have a script on this. We have this COSA, Screen Act, Online Safety Act. There's a whole bunch of different names for these things, but that's the everybody gets carded thing I mentioned before. Um, it's kind of a related thing in practical terms, because if content side censorship from the effective censorship from the payment processors doesn't prevent people from getting to or being able to get support for, or basically just shuts down a huge amount of very, very commonplace and I mean, we're not even talking about necessarily risque material, but very commonplace games, even things like games with very violent themes. Okay, we'll say chainsaw themes. Now, say what you will about that. People have been playing that for 30 plus years, depending on the game. We don't even talk about the Hollywood stuff, right? If it was really that risky, you got to look at the Hollywood stuff. Okay, that's kind of where a lot of it started. Some of it was inspired by that. What about that stuff? Um, what are the results from that? Uh, I'd say gaming is at least at least as innocuous or even less worse for wear with respect to a track record for influencing bad outcomes based on the content. So this is a subjective evaluation, but this content has been available for decades, and it's it's typically kind of just gassed up and go entertainment. It's rubbernecking, right? The kind of thing that people just do to blow off steam. And these kinds of games have been well received for the most part. Some of the titles with a lot of gore and a violent kind of theme uh, actually they're very entertaining games. Now, um, you know, I understand someone might have a reservation about that. I can appreciate that from on a personal level, right? Not all media, not all entertainment is for everyone. Point blank. It's absolutely people have different preferences, and go with what your preference is. If you prefer not to see it, then don't. That's why the ratings are there. I don't believe Visa and Mastercard should do that. For one, I don't really believe that it is the role of um, intermediaries, okay, to determine the merit, artistic or otherwise, of the content that consumers are purchasing using their services. Um, I don't want to rehash what I did in the last video, which is kind of a list of the bills. More information is going to come out on that. But what we have here is a situation where you're on the one side going to face content restrictions, and jumping back over to the bills, the actual political and regulatory work, legislation. We're talking about having to identify yourself everywhere online, which is a new paradigm. That's not something that was ever expected or built in into the expectations of the internet. I could tell you that having researched it, grown up with it, being an IT guy of many years, that's not a necessary component. Okay, any more than, for example, having to blow on a breathalyzer to start your vehicle, which is incidentally a feature that's being mandated in some places in the world to start your car. Um, I don't believe that you should volunteer your whole privacy and your agency essentially online on the premise that somewhere at some point someone might be endangered if you don't volunteer that. It's not really a sound premise. It's definitionally a prompted um, fish in a bucket, if not a fishing expedition, launched in in like a reactive sense. That's not something you want to have online in a gaming context, for one thing. Uh, with the possible exception of where it's going to be a very young, very sensitive audience, something like that. Maybe you want to have that in that specific context, right? You want to have a more of a closed off environment. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. What is an issue? What is a problem? Is when you have everyone mandated to give over their identity and their essentially their search history, their inputs, right? Every thought that falls happens to fall either vocally or from your fingers on a keyboard with a mouse click, a tap on the tablet screen. Um, that could be viewed to be pretty intrusive. And a long story short, combined with big data, right? Big data mining, like databases, say again, everything is in there, and there's an AI there. It's a little bit like having, some kind of detective or something assigned to every individual person. It's actually rather like that. It may not visually look like that, but if you were to pull it up on a screen, I could tell you technically it's rather like that. It's kind of like perching a little canary on everyone's shoulder, and um, it observes everything that they do. It's a little bit creepy, actually, and more than that, it has potentially nefarious commercial, political, um, personal. There's all kinds of implications that don't need to be raised there. So we're looking at the market in gaming specifically coming under serious challenge, serious strain. Okay, a lot of the things people will consider entertaining in those markets, they're kind of getting pulled out of them. And people are being restricted from them. A lot of vendors also, just like the wholesale vendors, being booted out by some of these processors. That's bad. So that's restriction and choice. That's on a level of, I would say, crisis, not on the level of like imperiling every game everywhere. It's not taking away everyone's planetary ability to game, but in terms of going forward, in terms of having a market, having an open market, and not having something that's consolidated to maybe 4 or 5 different companies that are complete gatekeepers for very homogenized, very anodyne, sanitized content. Sometimes content that's reimagined. All right, it's kind of bastardized in some people's opinion, without naming specific titles and things. I'll put it this way: sometimes you just have a Cracker Barrel it's just doing just fine, kind of the way it is. Some people don't like it. Some people disagree. Some people want to make it into some kind of modern thing. Um, it seems to a lot of people, and now the company, that probably ought to stay about the way it is. Like, is there any need? And this from a technical standpoint, this is axiomatic. Um, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Right? If it's not broke, don't fuck with it. Um, that's not exclusively an axiom that you have to apply to technology. Sometimes it's just good common sense. That's true for some creative works too. Not everything has to be turned on its head and inside out and made into some homogenized, you know, neon colored like farce version of itself. I don't like that as a trend. I really don't like that as a trend, and I don't like it in entertainment, with some exceptions. I can't think of one offhand, but I know there have been exceptions. But as a trend, I generally don't like it. I like it to be the way it was made originally, and typically with a certain amount of creative liberty, right? Like the greatest games have not come from a cookie cutter and a checklist and sensitivity panels, and there might have been some A/B testing, but at the end of the day, there there's creative decisions made, and they worked. They certainly worked more traditionally. AAA gaming, for those who know, not in the best spot. Not in the worst spot, but definitely not in the best spot, and that's a whole other rabbit hole. So we have 3 different things, as I see it, that are hugely problematic culturally as trends. Culturally, commercially, it's kind of all tied up in there, right? If we're talking about tens of millions of people, and when we're talking about Visa and MasterCard, right, we're talking about potentially billions of people. And, they wake up or they come home and they want to get on their computer or console, whatever it is. There's different ways to access games, and you look for a game that's it has some kind of degree of explicit content, or either violent or sexual of some kind, right? Something typically you'd get a rating, and they're not able to get that. Well, we're all going to be playing Thomas the Tank Engine online, okay, very soon. Um, Surprisingly, some people have had issues with that. Uh, can't go into it, don't want to. The problem with this is it's not entertaining. Games and other media, I'm not saying it has to be entertaining, but it should be entertaining. That is the point. We have a big problem there, and the creative expression problem that goes with it. Also, there tends to be problems with feedback. They also stop people, customers, people that aren't customers that may be curious about it, from commenting on the product. And there's some things that go into that, like maybe there may be some balance issues. I'll put it this way with respect to feedback. Okay, they call it flooding. All right, bots may be involved. Reviews should be organic. They should be, they should be at least somewhat informed, and fair, from a standpoint of not lying about your experience with the product. That's hard. That's hard to regulate. It's a long issue. I don't even know how to get into that issue right now. It's something an essay would be appropriate for. But it stops people from doing that as well. So we're having a feedback issue, in terms of on the commercial side. That's kind of the payment processors saying, "Oh no, this opinion has to be excluded categorically because of the nature of the opinion." Sometimes that's a slippery slope. That's a hazard. And that's on the commercial side. That's private actor. No, it's not the First Amendment. I'm sure some people will think it's a controversial assertion. The First Amendment in the U.S., free speech, applies to government and public um, forums and places. This is among the reasons that we are advocating as an org, to belabor the point, but not everyone knows about this. Moving large, places like X, like YouTube, to be treated as public forums, right? Essentially, you can't just viewpoint discriminate against people expressing themselves there. And there has to be basically all it really means, there has to be even-handedness in administration, and better than present day best effort to not let it be a complete mess. I'll put it that way. So yeah, let me try and dial this into a cohesive point, because it's too much too fast. This organization, GBAMS, was designed to be a consumer feedback group, right? To be review and all of that. Um, with things like what's going on now in terms of the structure of the internet being reimagined, as it were, by global politicians, off the bat, I guarantee you they didn't go around and consult. If any engineers were consulted, it was in a negligible and cursory fashion. This is being foisted because of, oh, we have to do something, we have to do anything, and no, that's a way to get industrial accidents. That's a way to get unintended consequences. That's not how you should treat the world's largest and single information and communication and commercial transaction system. Like, what are you doing? It's a terrible idea to just foist something like this on essentially large part of the global population, which again is age gating ID, but what it comes down to is a lot of tracking and a lot of restriction to degrees, because you're not going to be able to get certain software or get news right from whatever source you so choose. In the event you do access things like that somehow, uh, that's going to be very directly tied to you. Some people would think that's a little bit odd, right? Like the presumptions that go into that don't seem commensurate with with a free and we might say democratic sort of way of conduct. you know, a dog tagged democracy is it's a little silly looking. Um, there's a reason that the military, for example, is not a democracy. These systems fundamentally differ. So yeah, there's a lot of unresolved, unconsidered questions in this whole paradigm shift that's being de facto ushered in, um, causing everyone to ID themselves, everyone to by default go into a very much more controlled and restricted in terms of routing, in terms of access. Something's happening with the Android store, right? There's the amount of changes that are happening are just it's unreal. And I mean, I am in tech. I am used to some fast pace of change, but this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. I've I've lived to see the rise of the internet. I don't want to see. I don't want to witness the strangulation, the death of the internet on the basis of something like this. Not to mention, just again, at a technical level, it breaks certain websites. It's not pretty. It's not a very dynamic thing. It's basically they're just doing their bare minimum to comply. In which case, some websites like Wikipedia, in some cases, they're just going to cut the whole thing off. Um, very very bad practice. So restriction and consumer choice um, eliminate suppression of consumer feedback. All right. Es- Essentially, the restriction of the free and open access to the internet as we know it on the governmental side. Okay, the first is the commercial side. On the governmental side, we have much more monitoring and control that's being rolled out. There are safety concerns that are realistic to examine as questions. What's being proposed is not an answer. It's not even like an incoherent answer to it. It's a solution to some other problem, perhaps the problem of um, well, free and easy access to information that's outside of what certain parties, right, and certain interests in and outside of governments might want you to look at. That's kind of the direction it goes in, or it very easily could. It very easily could. There's reasons that when TV and radio was opened up, right, these things were licensed, but you also have private operators, things like ham radio and all that. You have an option for some free expression, right? And there's also rules that go with that stuff too. But we're seeing a narrowing of options, an enforced, late, and very very ill advertised one. Okay, for most people, this is just going to be a big surprise, right? If you're listening to me, if you're hearing this in some realistic time frame before some of this passes, it hasn't yet in the U.S. Um, the Screen Act is one, okay, and COSA's one. It's called Beard Bill, Block Beard. Again, I'm not going to go through the whole list. It is on the website, but these things all together are kind of like just it's you get a scarlet letter on your website on the internet, and someone doesn't like some big music company, for example, doesn't like a clip that you have in a video. You could just forfeit your whole website until they're satisfied, more or less here. Okay, in terms of the way some of this is structured. Not to mention like views that politicians may or may not find to be the most palatable, and maybe they're not. But freedom of expression, again, going back in the American tradition, we hold it in such high regard that if you want to look up some skunk's opinion online, that's part of the package. Part of the package. It's baked in. So that's where discretion and all that, and maybe debate and all that good stuff may come in. But the option should be there. And what we're getting with these ID schemes and the restriction schemes is the elimination of that option. It's very concerning. That's very concerning. This goes way before the video game stuff, right? because the internet, which has been the wellspring of immense amounts of creative output and technical achievements that have gone into these platforms, that have gone into these games, that's what's at stake here. That's what's being attacked at core. And gaming will, from a commercial standpoint, will fall in line with that. And it's going to be the worldwide McDonald'sization, or new Coke, new Cracker Barrel, for whatever good those are worth, of gaming, and that's going to suck. It's just that's going to suck. I'm sure there'll be some good stuff that will still come out, but why just volunteer to just you know glide into some kind of restricted a dark age of gaming? Um, no, no, leave the market open, leave it alone. Um, for the most part, I mean, everyone knows about the popular games like GTA or something. I'm not a big fan of those, but most people know that you play GTA, you don't turn around and just leave out of the house and hijack a car. It's really not how that works. So these kinds of things, and that's one of the ones that may be censored. It's heavy-handed. It's anti-entertainment. Anti-entertainment. I want that to be a word that people keep current in their mind. It's not just that it's unentertaining, right? It's um, it's not just that it's restricted, because yeah, it's getting restricted. But when you boil it right down, I mean, you think of a motive, or a nearest motive to what appears to be at play here as an outcome. You might not be able to prove that someone's or any one person is anti-entertainment. There's other terms you may use to describe the person's worldview. May or may not apply, but it's pretty clear the outcome. It's anti-entertainment, and that's bad. I don't know how to put it in a phrase in any different way. It's dismal, it's boring, um, and it's anti-human freedom, which someone or other, it may have been school teachers, it may have been in public school. I'm pretty sure it was, and many textbooks, and a couple hundred years, give or take. Maybe some wars, maybe some were world wars, all go into informing is like important. The human freedom and democracy, right, is supposed to go together. Does this relate to gaming? Well, yeah, because if you don't have them, it's going to be a real bitch to get video games. Okay, so we have to go back to fundamentals. Apparently, we're going back to fundamentals. I guess we're doing whatever the fuck this is now. Oh, I guess we're doing tyranny now. Um, that's pretty anti-entertaining. I find myself opposed to that personally. Um, I guess we're not going to do that. At least I'm not. I'm not into to complying with that. That one will get pulled up from a personal standpoint. I recommend you look at it the same way. If the basics, if the very basic, and this is how I'm going to wrap it up. If the very basics are not there, if you can't go out and be a big blabbermouth in like say a university campus and spout off the wrong opinions or the right ones, all right, who's to say whatever the issue is, people are going to have an opinion on it one way or the other. They may not have an opinion on it. You're entitled to not have an opinion on it. You're entitled to be silent about it. You're entitled to think about it and say nothing. You're also entitled to speak about it. That's the whole freedom and democracy thing, right? All that good stuff. You don't have that shit, you kind of can forget about video games. And the video games you're going to get, it's going to be a lot worse. All right. Why we have to go back to the fundamentals? Why in the year 2025, which I don't see my jet car parked out there. Oh, that's right. No one has one. But I don't consider myself entitled to that. No one's entitled to that. But we're going in the wrong direction. We're going in a regressive, anti-liberty, anti-creativity, homogenized and homogenization promoting, consolidation-centric, um, speech chilling, artistic freedom restricting, market breaking, okay, direction. Why is this again? What? Why is this in any way, shape, or form the the outcome, the machination that's evident in policy and commercial corporate policy? Why is this all coming out now and coming out about together in this relatively short time frame? That's a rhetorical question. That's not what I'm here to delve into. I, that's a whole other long topic that may or may not have fruitful data points and things to discuss about it. You may or may not find that. That's not my interest to bring up here. My interest is to highlight it, to point out that it is injurious and harmful and an intrusion on entertainment and the preferences and whims and customs and lifestyles of entertainment enthusiasts, people who cinephiles, people that like movies, gamers, people that love games, such as myself. Um, this is a massive imposition, where people that aren't into that, they may not see any difference, right? Or the difference may come very late in terms of when they brush up against a restriction online that stops them from researching something or gives them the wrong information. Um, you might find yourself mandated to use only one or two AIs that just have an unfortunate tendency to lie to you, and you can't do anything about it. How do you like them apples? It's a hypothetical, but it's not a very far-fetched hypothetical. This is the problematic outcome of everyone being funneled and restricted into very siloed, um, tightly controlled, and creatively constrained, feedback cut off sort of systems. And that's the direction things are going. And gaming, the whole points of like getting down to the finer points of like artistic appreciation, and highlighting gaming culture as a day-to-day thing. Okay. And reviewing games and highlighting the best of all that, kind of the cultural highlights, right? The arts. Those work when your marketplace is not being ransacked and pillaged, and politically repressed through um, policing and quasi-policing measures. You can't very well extol and celebrate the best of that, and very casually delve into and represent the culture involved in gaming when it's there's flaming arrows being shot into it, metaphorically speaking. Okay. When the rug is being pulled, technically speaking. All right, I say this again as an IT guy. Um, this is not the foundation, the foundational aspects of more than one form of entertainment, more than one form, but the principal interest here, being gaming, um, they're being undermined. They're being undermined. They're being put under strain, serious duress. They're being eliminated in some cases, right? It's the elimination of options. It's the next best thing to the elimination of choice. Uh, if you are all deep down, right, here's a thonk for you. If you're all embedded and loaded up with so-called technology, and the total outcome of your saturated lifestyle with technology, which I'm a techie, right? Like baseline, I'm enthusiastic. If I have to have an initial starting disposition, I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna be curious. I might be interested in adopting technology. That's my basic disposition. I'm a technology user. Um, but there's a caveat. If it doesn't serve you, if it takes away from your agency, if your technology serves to rob and constrain you, okay. If your so-called technology serves more as a handcuff, all right, than a hand up or a stepping stool or whatever other metaphor, then your technology is it's as good as a stone on you. Okay, it's as good as a manacle or fetters. Those are types of chains, and that's not good. I mean, some people in some contexts may see value in that, and there are a variety of social circumstances in which people do see value in that kind of application of a technology that serves that kind of purpose. Most people, most of the time, and marketplaces in particular, don't work that way. They don't work that way. I can think of one exception: slave marketplaces. That's where the technology of chains and fetters is used to move people through open markets. And I say this with a certain amount of trepidation because it's an analogy, but ethically speaking, when things move in a certain proximity, when they get close enough to a practice that's actually that, you have to there's a moment for pause, right? As a person, as a practitioner in the field, ethically, it's something that's worth pausing to consider, right? The implications, the parallels. Is this that? How close is this to that? How can we avoid slipping back into having kind of like a slave market situation? And so, yeah, yeah, that's not too on point yet. But when there's no choice, right? When everybody has the same maybe two devices they can use, and maybe the same 3 or 4 apps, and everything's recorded, and everything is sent to the teacher and the headmaster and I don't know, a doctor and a shrink and a policeman. All your stuff just kind of automatically goes to people. That's pretty shitty, I think. Maybe someone thinks of a way that's good, but I think without informed consent, at the very least, that's pretty shitty. Also, I just want to play video games, right? Like, I just want to go online and play a game. Why is it that I have to register my ID? And then, if someone, I don't know, say I make a glib remark in the team chat, right? And it's maybe has a little bit of an off-color reference. Maybe in an unconsidered moment, there's an allusion to a traditionally perceived ethnic slur, something that may not be immediately placed in contemporary speech, but it's there if you go in the dictionary. Well, I mean, do you want to get a knock on the door from someone who's going to be digging through your shit online, like you're just talking shit to someone, and then like there are countries in which that's happening now. That's monumentally stupid. That's a gargantuan disincentive to even sit down and play a video game. I mean, for most people, some people might be good with it, but I mean, I think the baseline disposition is that human beings don't come prepackaged with nannies, and most people, most guys in particular, they're just fine with it that way. So yeah, we have a problem when free speech per se is met with potentially lethal repression by whomever. But if that becomes a commonplace practice, right? If socially, if that's allowed, whatever form that takes, right? Whether it's a police truncheon or an assassin's bullet or whatever, if that becomes the norm, I mean, we could just forget about the arts and culture. I mean, yeah, it'll probably survive in some form. I mean, it always has, and there's like, it'd be underground things, but like, why would we do that? Isn't the whole freedom and democracy and all of the things we were taught? Shouldn't that directly not be the case? I mean, I thought so. Um, so I mean, I still think so. I don't think we should accept that. On a baseline, I don't think we should accept, as in the very unfortunate example of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We should not accept fear as the guiding principle of public discourse, right? And there will be arguments that, well, he said such and such a thing and had such and such a narrative, and that made other people afraid. I mean, actually, I have some receptivity to that viewpoint. I don't think the answer is an assassin's bullet. Somehow, I don't think that ipso facto that means that that's the answer. There will be people that disagree. Uh, it's not really a conversation. That's not the point for me in this, obviously, right now. But you're welcome to try to debate me on that. This is not something I'm really going to get into in this context. But it's a debate that socially, like society, it need that's something that's, if possible, should be addressed. Um, yeah, you're never gonna you're never gonna get free markets and gaming creativity, and even just free expression, just like casually having fun online, unguarded and just free talking. If you have a bunch of people monitoring, and then you might have someone nuts out there hunting people that say something that crosses them. Um, these are things that cannot be accepted if we are to have free, open, and fun and entertaining options for us to enjoy ourselves and enrich our lives with. It's exceedingly basic, but this is where we're going back to, is a place of exceeding basicness. So that's where I have to speak from. That's what I have to speak on. Uh, the higher minded stuff that I wanted to go into with this organization. I'm seeing a lack of supporting conditions, of foundational conditions for that work to proceed apace in the way that I wanted, and has been for some time. But I think the Kirk incident kind of puts a little bit of like an illustration of, its case in point of the some of the problems. The other, Visa and Mastercard, just as examples. There's others. PayPal is a lot of second guessing. Okay, is going on, and a lot of behind the scenes sort of restrictions, and um, we could say in a roundabout way, repression or discouragement, right? Chilling effect on artistic freedom is happening. And then, of course, we have all of these bills coming out and regulations: EU, US, Australia, India, Canada, where they're pretty much trying to make it so that you're very identifiable and possibly very contained online. Long story short, you put all this together. I mean, I hate to say it, but I mean, fuck gaming. It's like, unless you're doing it yourself exclusively on your legacy computer, which these are things that techies and collectors, people more like myself and others, are able to do. We can furnish those alternatives to ourselves, and with modern technology, frankly, there's like Arduinos and Pis and like all kinds of things. There's all kinds of options to give yourself stuff like that. But anything that touches the internet, any modern game that has to, maybe it's mandated to be sold through one of these systems. Okay, anything that goes through a modern marketplace, it's going to be heavily censored, controlled, possibly. I loathe to say booby trapped, but I mean, backdoored in a sense. All right, like um, your Minecraft, for example. This is just an example. or whatever game probably shouldn't be like second guessing the shit you type into it, right? Like these are sorts of fundamental questions, like you know, if you're dealing with an NPC in a game, right? An NPC is a non-player character, kind of a scripted character in a game, just does what the script says. Uh, how would you like to find out later that, like, your dialogue tree choices um, aren't just determinative of what outcome you get in the game for entertainment, right? But their telemetry for someone to or some company, maybe statistically aggregated, maybe it's not personal, maybe it's everybody that plays, and they want to see everyone's choices and dialogue trees. That could be interesting. I mean, from a social science standpoint, if people know they're being studied and they volunteer to enter a study, and sometimes EULAs may have proficients like that, you should take a look. That could actually give people it could give scientists useful data for something. But that's not why most people play video games. That's not why technology principally exists, to report on you or to allow yourself to report on the most innocuous things, everything. Your Fitbit, your heartbeat, whatever it is. And there may be reasons for that, but that's a whole other story, right? We're not talking like entertainment like a video game. Totally discretionary. Totally different story. Um, it shouldn't just probably be like it's going out the back door, right? We need privacy. We need privacy protections written into law in more than one place, and we're going in a bad way. We're going in a bad way where markets are being um, hampered. They're being destroyed in some cases. Um, Artists are being shafted. They're being excluded. Um, entire marketplaces that deal in niche and probably underperforming commercially material. They're being cut out in some cases. It's more in Japan. It happens here too. It happened during some of the consolidation in the comic industry. So we're looking at malign and concerning trends in technology and in society, right? Like it's just gotten a little too real and a little too um, difficult for a an entertainment focused audience. I think in general, right? I mean, people can find their particular venues, but a lot of these things are upsetting to a lot of people, and they're disruptive to many more directly in commercial context. As these measures may be rolled out from the government side, from like the ID and like watch what you say online um, measures that are coming out, there's going to be chilling effects everywhere, and it's like we can scarcely consider or conceive of getting down to gaming online in the company of others, carefree company of others, or just at all. If we have these kinds of systems of coercion, control, monitoring, restriction, um, I mean, it's really ridiculous. It really is. It's something that's so at odds with the basic purposes that most people go into an entertainment consumer situation for, that it's if it doesn't dry it up right away, if it doesn't dry it up in the near future, it will strongly incentivize, and we will see in the intermediate term that force coming to bear, that effect, right, being realized in marketplaces. And long term, we might get a handful of conglomerate controlled syndicates, essentially, that are your sole gatekeepers for whatever gaming content. Um, I really don't have any words for that. I mean, that's ludicrous and unnecessary. unnecessary from an economic standpoint. Gaming has always started and been local. The earliest games were single person coding them. You don't need a whole cartel to build or play a video game. And if the only way you can sell or access them is effectively through a cartel-like structure, whether instigated by force of law or something like market conditions, but market conditions do not inevitably result in cartels. There's something wrong with that, right? You don't have to be an economics guy to know something's wrong with that. You could just be a citizen. You could just be someone with common sense. Or you could just, you could be a gamer and be like, this is bullshit. Because it is bullshit. I don't need a whole cartel. No one needs a whole cartel. And shouldn't be made to, have to interface with one to download a freaking video game, right? To play one. Something's real sus with that. All right. I think that's all I got. I mean, stop killing people for the viewpoints. Stop destroying our marketplaces. All right. Stop shitting on artists and customers. It's really not the place of a merchant in some kind of intermediate situation to slap hands. It really isn't. If we have to do something different than credit cards to just buy and sell whatever we want from entertainment market standpoint, then I think people are going to look at that. They're going to look at that because it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. This is very new. It's a very new thing, and it's not understood outside of the people that are frankly buy games all the time, or manga, comics, a lot. Most people don't know about this yet, right? We have big education issues to do. I'm not even talking about GBAMs or as gamers, just as people, as citizens, get talking to people about this. Because it's ridiculous. I don't want to live that way. I don't want to live in a fearful and contained state of threatened and restricted speech, creative output, market choices, having second guesses, and having an AI pop up perhaps in some way, whether in person or online, by mandate no less. Do you really want to buy that? Or you look at a certain website, you use certain browsers, Edge is one. You could be using a utility that's not from a standard marketplace. It's from a private, just some private software coder, right, on their own. And because it doesn't come from a blessed source, right, one of the Microsoft Store, it doesn't want to let you download it, right? It tells you it's dangerous. Now, it might be dangerous. You do take your risk into your own hands by working with something like that. Right, that is a risk that you assume, but if you're consciously assuming it, it's a risk you should be able to take. And this is, again, the elimination of choice. Without choice, you can't even play games. Okay, let's get real basic. Let's say somehow you get all the way into your video game after all this bullshit. Let's say it just rolls on. Right, we don't do anything. We accept it. I don't agree with that. I don't think we should do that. But let's say that's what happens, and you get all the way into your video game, and you have choices that, for the sake of argument, say you have a dialogue tree that are grayed out because they're unacceptable choices. They're there to show you what you shouldn't do. Now, is there some kind of social case for, in an educational piece of software, how this might demonstrate, model the best behavior? Sure it is. Sure. There is a case in either clinical or, academic, or there's any number of settings in which that is a perfectly valid premise for an application. forcing it on everyone through commercial chicanery and political machinations is not ethical. It is not, well, it may be creative, but it's not creative in a way that's good or useful or socially beneficial. And it just plain sucks. It's not a game I want to play, literally or figuratively. And that's what it comes down to. That's what it comes down to. I love video games. I mean, I'm a pretty big fan of freedom too. But case in point, video games. And most of which are pretty basic. Most of them actually aren't all that sensational or exotic in terms of their content. But not having to not having to show an ID and talk to someone because I want to play, for example, Super Solver's Outnumbered. That's a classic game. Classic. Okay. And that's a choice reference. Go ahead and look it up. Super Solver's Outnumbered educational math game. Very basic. You know what I don't need to do? I don't need to have someone give me a proctology exam in order to play that game. It's kind of, it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I don't think you should have to go through the third degree just to get a little entertainment. And if that's what they're going to impose on people by one means or another, then you're going to see a whole lot less entertainment happening, right? Realized entertainment. The more barriers, the more obstacles you put in between it, people and getting it, and in some case, maybe there's some, extreme content that maybe there's, there should be more barriers. I understand that argument there. Maybe some some exceptional case, but basically the more commonplace barriers you put in commerce, you get less successfully completed commerce. Okay. The more barriers you put in the way of free speech, well, lo and behold, you get, more and more select speech and so on and so forth. And if this wasn't ruining video games, maybe I wouldn't care quite so much, but it is. And it's ruining it for everybody, potentially. Okay. Doesn't matter if I can, I can furnish my own fun game from, I have games from 1990. I don't have to say boo to anyone about that, right? I've owned a license for the whole time and whatever, but not everyone will be so lucky. Not everyone has the facility to store a CD or the CD-ROTs. It happens over 25, 30 years, whatever, 10 years. It could happen in a couple of years. I just don't like to see people disempowered, right? I don't like, it's kind of the fundamental, one of the ethos of the org, gamer empowerment. I don't like to see people disempowered. And what's happening now, if virtually any one of these things, and I do include the assassination as an example of something that's a problem, if that continues. If these things go on in the direction they are, we can kind of just forget about video games as we've known them, which already it's under immense strain. Yes, I'm going to frame all that in terms of video games because that's the premise of the group, and it all very acutely and directly impacts that. So we got to stop it. We got to do the best we can to stop it. Roll it back. Do not have them pass it in the first place. We're going to have to find alternatives for some of these payment processors because I doubt they're going to listen to reason. They may. We may prevail upon them that this is inappropriate interference in consumer choice. But I don't have strong faith in that. Alternatives should be sought until or unless they offer any indication that they're willing to reconsider. And people need to take the proper precautions and maybe fucking cool your attitudes on wherever the political views are. But that's not the arena I'm getting into with it, right? I mean, that is my basic take on it. But I want to play video games. All right, that's what my people want to do. If you're out there killing folks, well, I'll tell you what, you're not playing video games if you're doing that. Like that's one of the things that you it's kind of mutually exclusive. Um, this gets a bad rap in the media because they look for scapegoats. But like, if you're a homebody and you got a controller in your hand, with the possible and extreme and not applicable example of like drone operation, usually by states, right, by governments, that's the one case when a controller is in your hand and people can die. But that's the military. If you're a gamer, you sit home and you fuck around with digital fantasy, like nobody hurt, no harm, no foul. Why are these big companies? Why, in a roundabout way, are governments? And I mean, I don't see a direct impact apart from like in Charlie Kirk's case, he did speak about like he kind of poo pooed video games. All right, it's not to disrespect or anything. It's just to bring up a point that one of his positions was like, you shouldn't do that. You should put the money in the home and family first. And okay, I get that principal point. Totally separate debate thing that goes with that, right? Like personal priorities. That's understandable. He has that viewpoint. Other people have some different and maybe nuanced different opinions on that. But what happened there was not the right thing. That needs to happen with respect to a disagreement, and it's something we have to be on guard, not to let commercial, political, or criminal bad actors take a giant steaming shit on the great glory that is video games, and deprive us all of a good thing and a great time. And that's what will happen if we don't get a little bit more determined and organized and serious in protecting our interests, and I don't know, maybe doing a little part to exercise a little control and demonstrate maybe a form of civility. I'm not really sure of the right word here, but composure, right? If you're in flow, if you're in a game, you're probably not like grousing at someone online, although you may be on your team chat. But that's usually, for fun. That's like a secondary thing. For some people, that's their main thing, but like that's something else, right? And yeah, long story short, we can't we can't let these things just roll on, or games are dead. That would be a terrible casualty in the wake of what's already happened and some very bad turns in gaming labor market, in the employment. Like there's one tragedy after another, and it's just being compounded by wrong-headed policies and agendas. And yeah, that's beyond the scope of GBAMS. That's that's societal. It's economic. It's financial. There are recommendations we can make on certain things, as far as bills and whatever. But these are wider issues. There's big wider issues here. And if the foundation, let me just tell you, coming out of the 90s, we've lost so much of the like peace. Okay, the tranquility. Missing tranquility. All right. If you don't have some backdrop of tranquility, it's going to fuck with your games. It's also potentially going to make it impossible or unduly difficult to game. That's one of the things you notice when there's something missing over time, right? It's like, you don't get a spark in an ignition without oxygen, right? Some things are just required, right? And there's a lack of tranquility and focus. People are all on their devices and everything, and so much anger and so much confusion and restriction now coming in. How are we going to game? How are we going to game when we have all that shit, to deal with? So, on that note, I'm going to leave that rhetorical question for you to ponder. That's something everyone should consider that loves gaming, that considers gaming important. The if the foundational aspects of what support gaming are missing, if they're jeopardized, broken, whatever, then it's going to be real difficult to game. So that's just it's a practical consideration at the end of the day. And yeah, that's my big. Those are my big thoughts on that. I want to thank you for watching me and listening to my you know um, diatribe on all these issues. I don't know if this is still broadcasting. I assume it is. But I said my piece, and there it is. And I'm Jdawg. Um, this is it's kind of a offside TED Talk version of hosted by GBAMS. And I don't know if anyone watches this, you could say, hey, I've gotten comfy to the idea that I'm probably doing this a lot of the time. I'm doing it at least for a long time. Maybe somebody sees it one day, but I'm doing it for myself, right? Um, it is what it is. Okay. Um, thanks again. Thanks again. I appreciate your interest and Viva Gaming, and let's keep it fresh. All right, Jdawg out.